Then I have to share screen. Cool. Have you mute everybody?
Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Good. Right. For those of you in the Whitney group who watched Tom's presentation last night, this is just totally coincidental that I was going to talk about cameras. It's a similar sort of subject, except I don't have all the wonderful AVs that he presented. But the first part of this is somewhat similar to his, actually. Let me just do this. And let's go. What I plan to do, I mean, first of all, I've really struggled to think of a nice, new, fresh subject to talk about, to be honest, on photography. And finally decided to do something on sensors and things like that. And I thought, well, we've done all this before. So there's perhaps in this presentation, there's nothing new. As we go through it, I'd be happy for any sort of comments or corrections or disagreements in some of the things I've said, because I thought, well, I'm going to present this, so you know, I ought to research it a bit better so I know what I'm talking about. Once you start doing that, you get deeper and deeper and think, God, I know nothing. And, that's not quite true, but some of the things here, I made some assumptions on the various aspects, but if we come to that and you feel like adding a comment, then that's fair enough. What I was going to do is just do an overview of digital camera ranges, very briefly, and then perhaps the larger section is just sensor sizes and comparisons of what they mean in real terms and the sort of pictures you can take. And then I've actually got a little section on mirrorless cameras, which I felt perhaps I should have put that at the beginning when I was comparing cameras. But to sort of restructure it, I thought, well, it does sit there because it's got a couple of features that you don't have in DSLRs, but you know, it seems to fit all right anyway. And then just a little bit on image stabilization, because that's one of the aspects of mirrorless cameras where they can perhaps maybe do a little bit better than DSLRs. Anyway, let's have a look. Just starting just before digital cameras, if we're going from that point historically, looking at 35mm SLRs. Right, no, it's not actually a picture of mine, but I've got one identical to that. It was great in the respect it had interchangeable lenses, screw-in types. It had manual focus, manual aperture, manual film speed settings, shutter speed settings, and manual exposure, which you set. There was a nice little exposure meter, and you could then look at it and calculate your settings from that. So it was quite a nice camera, and I've still got it. I actually bought a film for it, black and white film, just to give it another try, which I've had for ages. I really must get round to having go at that. Anyway, just looking at the range, very broad brush, but we're looking at compact digital cameras. Now these, in many respects, are dying out, although I've got one very nice one still, well, my son's got it at the moment, but that was Panasonic Lumix TZ70, I think. And those of you who saw Tom's presentation last night, he sort of rated that as one of the best. But one of my favourites was the Canon Xless. I think I had 3 of those, and they were really good. And then I moved to the Lumix, and I've had a couple of TZs which were very, very good. And the nice thing about them is, as was said, it's something you can slip in the pocket. But the big question is, sort of excluding some of the fantastic zoom lenses they had, is how do they compare with smartphones? And I've left smartphones out of this because we discussed last week we were going to treat that as a separate subject. So apart from the odd mention through the presentation, I actually left that out. So looking at DSLR cameras, use the examples of really the ones to look at. I was going to look at APS-C and full frame models, the DSLRs, which over the range we're looking roughly at 16 to 50 megapixel resolution, and a whole host of sophisticated features. And we can discuss Pentax, Nikon and Canon and pros and cons about that, but I wasn't really going to get into that at all. And then mirrorless cameras, which I have left until the end, but largely, I mean, they've been around quite a long time, and that I'm excluding compacts and things like that, which clearly anything that's not a DSLR is mirrorless. But I've really only looked at the higher range ones with interchangeable lenses and EVFs, visual viewfinders, electronic viewfinders, if you remember. And I tend to think about cameras like Olympus, Fuji, Sony, historically, and then latterly, I think Nikon and Canon, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions. And we're looking at micro four thirds, which I think is an important area with some advantages. And again, 16 to 50 megapixels over the range, with a variety of features and performance issues. We're just looking at sensor sizes, which this is stuff we've actually done before. We're talking, I haven't gone up into medium format or anything like that, so I'm just concentrating on full frame, which is 35 or 36 millimeters in terms of the sensors. But historically, that is really derived from 35 millimeter slide film. And then APS-C, which can also be described as half frame, historically, that was a negative film, which I looked up, which is 25.1 by 16.7 millimeters, aspect ratio 3:2, and that was the classic half frame negative size. So that's really where APS-C comes from. Then we can drop down Nikon, Sony. Canon is slightly different in terms of its crop factor, but to all intents and purposes is the same. Micro four thirds is, I suppose, when I think of micro four thirds, I think of Panasonic Lumix and Olympus. although I think there are a few more. But those seem to be the two front runners. And then you can get much, much smaller, right down to the tiny sensors in a smartphone, which just begs the question, how on earth can they take such good pictures? But that's a subject for another presentation. I think you are probably in line for doing that. Okay, I don't know if there's anything more to be said about the sensor sizes. I just thought I'd put this chart up. There's a whole range of sizes going from IMAX, which is massive, at the bottom, going through the medium formats, and then the most popular ones, the full frame, APS-C, and then getting smaller, micro four thirds, which is this one, right down to the tiny little ones in the various smartphones. So just doing the comparisons, I'd say question often comes up, or the statement is often made, you know, oh, he or she is a good photographer, you know, you ought to buy a full frame. Well, the first question is why? And there are many suggestions as to why it is, sort of true or otherwise. Better dynamic range, perhaps. Better low light performance, and less noise than smaller sensors. Shallower depth of field for small f numbers and across the range, basically. And better resolution, which should perhaps have two question marks. So just looking at those individually, there's a large sensor better than the small one, and you get better dynamic range. There is one reason why you should, but it does depend on the pixel density. You can get a lot of sensors onto the larger sensors to get higher resolution, but you can also have less sensors, which are larger, and this is sort of in general electronics really. So there's something which is larger. If you think of a photocell, the larger the photocell, the larger number of photons it can cope with before it actually saturates. If you think of a pixel saturating, it's when the light's very bright, for example, and it just can't cope with any more. So, you know, it basically just cannot handle that. So you're unable to pull it back in post processing. And that's largely true. You can get more light before it saturates. Better low light performance. Well, reading a bit about that, and there are lots of factors which affect noise. If you measured the noise from the sensor in the dark, there would be a certain amount of noise that you could see, which would be from the associated electronics, basically. Then as you start putting more light into it, what's the better word to use, perhaps for want of a better word, but the processing of the light that's going into it creates noise in itself. But overall, what we call the signal to noise, which is the important feature, is that if the signal itself, the light itself, is a lot more than the noise, then you don't really see it. You generally only see noise when you get down to the very, very low light levels, and then you start to see it. That's generally true, but a little more debatable than saturation. I've made a comment there, and I'm not sure why I put it in there. Large lenses in full frame cameras are significantly more. Yes, yeah. The reason for putting that in, just to remind myself, is that if you've got bigger lenses, which you do have with the larger sensors, then you're actually collecting more light. So that should have a beneficial effect on the amount of noise you're getting from the sensor, that you're starting with a high level of light to begin with. Is a large sensor better than a small one? I keep reading that. Shallower depths of field, small f numbers. That is largely true, and I'll come a little bit to an explanation of that a little bit later. And in that respect, they are better. The portraiture, particularly if you want to get the blurred background and maybe a blurred foreground as well. So you've got a lot more control over the bokeh or bokeh, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So that is, and I certainly find a great advantage, coupled with the better dynamic range. Better resolution, well, yes and no. It depends how the resolution is purely dependent on the number of pixels you have. And it is better, in a sense, to choose a camera with the lowest number of, the lowest resolution that you actually need. 20 to 25 is generally considered the top end, but on the majority of cameras now, you can have a model which goes up to 50 megapixels and above. The only reason you might want that is if you're going to do, for example, very large prints, or if you want to crop very, very heavily. So, you know, there's a choice there. There is the opportunity for better resolution, but you need to consider, you always need to consider what is suitable for the sort of photography you're doing. So I think I've concluded that in saying, is a large sensor better than a small sensor? Well, it depends. And there is one thing particularly important, haven't really talked very much about lenses. The choice of lens and, well, here, optics, sensor design, processor design. Some processors will be better than others, even though they have the same number of photo sites on them. So there's a lot of design and software, etc., etc. And this will have an influence on the picture quality. And the last point then, forgetting to mention the photographer. Best camera in the world will not give you the best photographs if you don't know what you're doing. And I often don't. Then looking at smaller sensors, I did start by saying perfectly adequate performance, but that's a bit of a negative statement because, again, it depends on what you're doing. So any good camera will have appropriate, excellent performance, depending on what you want to do. There are some advantages as well. You'll have smaller, lighter camera bodies and optics. That will reflect on the cost as well. Not necessarily proportionally to the size of the sensor. It really depends on the manufacturer and the particular design of the camera. What you do get, which can be a big advantage, is better telephoto reach. You will get greater depth of field than larger sensor devices. That may not matter, but we'll come to that in a moment. But that can be a disadvantage, particularly if you're doing close-up work, portraiture, that sort of thing. I sometimes think with macro it might be a bit of an advantage. I don't know, maybe. And that I've mentioned the lower cost. Yeah, that goes without saying, really. The top of the range cameras with 4x3 sensors. That's particularly what I'm talking about here. There's very little to compare actually between APS-C and full frame that you would particularly notice. The one thing which we're going to come to is that we talk about sensor size, and people do make the mistake of saying, well, you know, you've got a smaller sensor size. Well, you know, you can get around that by just cropping. And it's not really a fair comparison, because if you take full frame camera and you crop that to the size of a 4x3, you do actually lose 3/4 of your resolution. Now that may not matter, but again, we will come to this in consideration of the optics design, which is tailored exactly to the size of the sensor that you've got. I didn't mention smaller, lighter camera bodies, reduced weight and cost. Just on the point of reduced weight, there is a photographer that I was reading who was a Nikon man, and he just started using Olympus, and he's not the only one who's moved from the large full frame cameras to Olympus, and it slipped my mind now. Someone might be able to remind me. The wildlife photographer, Andy Rouse. Andy Rouse, is that correct?
Yeah.
The Andy Rouse has moved from a Canon man, or being a Canon representative, to Olympus. Didn't read anything about his reasons why. It's probably financial, but anyway. There is another photographer that I read an article on. I forget his name, but he is a Nikon man, and he is also a wildlife photographer. And he went on a trip, and he had to go to a remote island somewhere for bird photography. And he weighed up all his Nikon kit, and it was basically just too heavy to take. They were limited in the amount of weight they could take on the final flight out of this island, which was about a 45-minute flight. And he commented that his Olympus kit, which was a micro four thirds with the appropriate lenses, so he could double his effective focal length with the reduced size of sensor and the appropriate lenses. So he could do everything he wanted to the same, from his point of view, the same quality as he would get from his Nikon cameras for, I think he said, about half the weight. So he could take the equipment he needed on his trip. With the Olympus kit that he chose. I don't know what he would do in one of the OM series, I imagine, but there is an advantage. There's a better telephoto reach. This become clear in the next couple of slides, and it's something I have talked about before. The smaller sensor gives you an extended telephoto reach, based really directly on the crop factor. So micro four thirds is half the crop factor of a full frame, so you can actually double your effective telephoto reach. if we look at the sensor comparisons here, you can take what you would see visually, or if you projected it onto a screen, this is what you would see from your full frames lens, and it would be a circle. The sensor sits in here like this, and it's a 35 or 36 millimeter. This says 35 millimeter film, and this is the image you would see. This is the image you would see. If you take the crop sensor, then this is the image you would see. So effectively, what you're seeing is a magnification. You're getting longer reach from the same. And if you look at this picture here, you can see that the smaller your sensor goes, the smaller proportion of the of the image that you see. Now, if you just crop, as I said before, that effectively it's just taking a picture which may not have enough resolution to give you what you want. If you design the appropriate lens to fill this portion, the crop sensor, I suspect this is APS-C here, not 4/3, but this is more like 4/3. Oh, excuse me. I need a drop of water. I should have got some beer, actually. Since the, if you have, let's say, a 20 megapixel micro 4/3 frame, then you're still seeing the same resolution as you would from a 20 megapixel full frame. But you're effectively getting that longer reach. There we are, that's another one. These are just some dimensions if you're interested in those, but it just sort of really, the crop factors, when you look at the crop factors compared to the area, the crop factor is taken as a diagonal of the sensor. And that's what's used in all the appropriate calculations between the two. But if you look at the area, micro 4/3 sensor is more than or less than a quarter of the size in area of the full frame sensor. So you have to consider that cropping is just not appropriate or not good enough. Or should I say, that's not quite right, but not as good as having the lenses designed for that camera, because you recover your resolution. I think in general, because if you're looking at the same resolution or the same number of sensors, fundamentally the low light noise performance is probably less than with larger formats, probably, and the dynamic range will be lower, for the simple reason that if it's got the same number of sensors, then they're going to be quite a lot smaller. But having said that, the design, technology is improving rapidly all the time. So you can't just take the fundamental differences, because there is so much more affecting the result from the design of the sensors, the design of the electronics, the performance of the software, and again, not forgetting the settings that the photographer has chosen to put into it. Greater depth of field, the larger sensors. I've done something here. I'll pinch this out of the PhotoPill's site. Now, if I think it, should I talk about circle of confusion? Yes. When we talk about depth of field, we've got depth of field and depth of focus. The depth of field is here, where your subject is, and the depth of focus is what you see around your sensor. I think that is where they refer to the circle of confusion, not to be confused with the circle of trust, as some of you who remember the Fokker films might remember. But I don't know why it's called the circle of confusion, but it is. But basically, if we consider a focus, so this is where we focused our lens on here, our camera on here, or the lens. The only point in focus is actually the point here. That is the only point in focus. Anything outside of that is out of focus, but not as much out of focus as it would be, say, out here. So what we have to consider is what is an appropriate depth of field, if you like, this distance here, beyond the focal point and behind the focal point. And that's really what we can perceive. And that does change. There are formulas for calculating it, and you can find them on all sorts of apps. You can have an app, you can have the PhotoPills app, which I think is quite good, actually. And they will tell you what the appropriate depth of field is, which is perhaps useful in macro work, particularly before when I was doing the focus stacking. But it might be useful to know what your acceptable depth of field is. In most cases, I find just playing around with the camera until you see what you like. So it doesn't really matter in such cases. But it does actually depend on what you're going to do with your picture. Now, I was reading something about the calculations for cinema, which are much, much tighter, because you've got this is in the days of film, really, but this is where it came from, in the days of film before digital and electronic recording. The film itself was only 35 millimeters, perhaps, and you imagine how much you were projecting that. The film was a Super 35 or something. I believe there were bigger ones, but you're then projecting that onto a very, very large screen. And if you look closely at it, what you see on your 10 by 8 print compared to what you see on the cinema screen, you wouldn't notice any slight difference in the focus. So it just depends on what you're doing with your film. But basically, there is a calculation, and you put in the details of your lens, your sensor size, and everything else, and it will tell you what your effective depth of field is. And how I see it, as definition is that the eye can't tell the difference, that it looks as though the whole thing is in focus. If you reduce the aperture, then you will increase the depth of field. And basically this, if you look at the lines from the focus, which will focus here on your sensor, and then you look at the distance out here, and these will focus at this point. That's sort of a nominal point. There are no numbers on this. And you look in here, you've got a much deeper depth of field. If you follow these lines here, it's just basically where the lines cross, and you can see that in this. The other thing is that taking landscape photography compared to close-up, and you reduce your aperture, then you will also move the focal point so that you have more or less in focus between the point you focus, between yourself, between the subject and the camera, than you do beyond it. And I'm not talking about hyperfocal distance here at all, but in general, if you're taking landscape, the quickest and easiest way to get most of it in focus is to focus about a third of the way in of the area that you want to look at. Now, having talked about, this is where I'm a little bit unsure, but I'm assuming the same principle applies to a smaller lens, as applies to a smaller aperture. You've got this extended depth of field. And the focal length of the lens doesn't change. It's actually the field of view that changes. And you can apply what's called lens equivalence to the there's lens equivalence, and that is calculated by multiplying the given focal length, which would be always referred to 35 millimeters. You multiply that by the crop factor. So micro four thirds, which has a crop factor of 2, for the same lens with the same focal length, will give you twice the reach. That is not the depth field, and it's giving you twice the reach. So you've got more depth field, which can be a disadvantage in portraiture, but you've got a much extended apparent focal length. So you get a doubling of the effective focal length with a micro four thirds over a full frame. I've left this to the end. With what I have actually called mirrorless interchangeable lenses with electronic viewfinder. The Olympus has been around for quite some time. I don't know how long actually, but quite some time. There's the other famous ones I haven't got a picture of here, with the Panasonic, the Lumix range, which is quite highly regarded. And the two that I'm talking about, particularly Olympus, they seem only to do micro four thirds with the same sort of range of resolution, and they've got a variety of features and performance. Mirrorless cameras are generally smaller and lighter. Generally, not necessarily, but I've just compared the Nikon, what am I doing? Two Nikons, the D750 and the Z6. Now you've removed the mirror, so you can actually get a larger, well, you actually move you effectively, because you've lost the mirror, you can move the lens closer to the sensor, and you can have a larger lens, which gets more light to the sensor, and with the wider geometry. Is AF better on DSLR? That's an often discussed point, because the advantage always claimed of a DSLR over over a mirrorless is that you have got an AF, a separate AF, dedicated AF detector autofocus. Whereas you can't have that on a mirrorless. And certainly, I discovered this myself when taking some pictures. It was the first time I think we went out taking pictures of the locos at Didcot, and I just found it was much easier to focus on using live view, and it didn't work very well because I was focusing using the sensor, and of course that only had contrast, which is just simply looking for contrast, whereas a good AF will be looking at phase detection and contrast. But that's now built in to the sensors, so certainly most of the modern mirrorless cameras now have the proper phase and contrast autofocus built into the sensor itself. Mirrorless live view performance is better. I have been criticised for, and I found this with one of the earlier. I had a Canon, one of the Canon cameras, and of course you took the picture using the EVF, and it just took a time to recover. Maybe only half a second, but that was infuriating, and that does tend to be criticised. But I've got a Nikon Z6, and that is just instantaneously superb. So that, I guess the new Canons are very much the same, but it's not a problem. What most mirrorless have is in-body stabilization. It's called in-body stabilization. It's called. Anyway,
in-body image stabilization.
Image stabilization. Yeah, I'm stumbling over my words here. In-body image stabilization, which is much easier on mirrorless. I was going to say that you don't get it on DSLRs, but apparently that's not true. It is possible. Sorry?
I've got it on my Pentax.
Yes. Yeah. It is more difficult, but yes, I thought you had. Because I looked and I thought, Pentax, yes. But generally and historically, you don't get it on DSLRs. That basically uses detection with accelerometers, and mainly accelerometers, but also gyroscopes. Now, this sounds enormously complex, but which it is in some senses. But gyroscopes and accelerometers can be built into the electronics, and they can be tiny. To look at them, you probably need a microscope to see them, or even an electron microscope. Basically, you get. I think I made a note of it here. I remember it at the list, but you can get 5. Generally, people will quote 5-axis. I don't know about yours, Ray, but so you get what you call the up and the down and the sideways, and also the torsion. And basically, this makes the correction minute corrections by actually moving the sensor. Whoops, what have I done? Let's go through the other considerations for the cameras. Since the newer cameras have the larger mount, larger diameter mount, and this applies certainly to both the Canon and the Nikons, you can get a mount converter. AF may not work on some aftermarket lenses. And I do have a little story here that I had what I thought was a very nice Tamron 600. It was a 150 to 600 millimeter lens. And it didn't work very well. If you focused, if you did a rough manual focus to start with, it would autofocus, but that's not useful in some cases anyway. So I contacted Tamron. They said, "Oh yes, this can be converted to work with a Nikon Z6 and a converter." And they said, "You contact fixation," which I did. And I said, "How much will this cost?" And they said, "Nothing." And I sent it off to them. I got it back, return of post. But I was really delighted. Put it on the camera and it did nothing. It basically would not do any autofocus whatsoever. And I looked a little bit deeper into the lists, and there was just at the end of the note on this particular one, it said MF, which I hadn't noticed, which meant manual focus only. So basically, by upgrading it, they made it worse. And when I looked at it, the spec was that it was manual focus only. So I had a look at it, and I changed it. I got quite a good price, I think, from Wex, and bought the equivalent Sigma, which works superbly well. It's really good. So, you do have to be careful if you're converting. Of course, I know certainly the Nikon with the mount converter will work perfectly well on all Nikon lenses. But you need to be careful with aftermarket products. Lens stabilization. There are two ways of doing it. One is, as I've mentioned, using vibration reduction in the image stabilization in the lens. And again, it detects whether you do it in the camera or whether you do it in the lens. It detects very, very rapidly, and the very, very small movements required to make the correction to the lens. And it will just adjust. It will adjust the lens itself. You can see here, not very well, but that's a mechanical adjustment, as is, I believe, in body stabilization, but it does actually move the sensor itself. That's reported to not to work that well for long focal lengths. So my short focal length lens on the Z6 has no stabilization at all, and it works really, really well. That's the only specific lens I've got for that camera. All the others are with the converter. But looking at, they would say that it's better on longer focal lengths to have in-lens correction. But looking at the specs, I mean, Dean, you might comment on this. Canon claim ATV correction, and actually it drops, but it's still 6 EV noise reduction at 500 millimeters. So that sort of goes a bit, in terms of the specification, goes a little bit against what has been said. But I'm sure in general that on the longer focal length, it's better to have the the correction in the lens. But you can do both.
Yeah,
I just
Chris, if you think about that, because of it, you're going to get much more exaggeration.
Yes.
With any kind of movement with a larger lens. So you've only got a certain leeway with moving the sensor.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's the reason, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, I guess there is something like that.
Yeah, that's the reason why it goes down as the focal length goes up.
It goes up. Yeah.
And that's you're talking about the 5DR there, aren't you? The top of the range Canon mirrorless camera.
Yes. Yeah.
That has 4 stops in body image stabilization and 4 stops generally on the lenses. And they
I see. That makes up the 8. Yeah.
Yeah, they work together to get the 8.
Yeah. Yeah. So, right, just very briefly, just the last slide, I think, as how does image stabilization work? Well, I fully understand the principles. It's quite easy, really. My background was, going a long way back, was electronics. But it's just, I did dig into it a bit, and I was surprised myself at how many applications use the effect of piezoelectricity. And for those that don't know, the piezoelectricity is, it can be, any object, any material, if you subject it to force, you squeeze it or tread on it or something like that, will produce an electrical signal. Probably undetectable, but in general there are, I think, 3 types: either crystal, or a ceramic material, or actually a capacitor. That when you squeeze a capacitor, it will change its capacitance, and you can measure across that to measure the force you're putting on it. But basically, I mean, I'm guessing a lot of these are either crystal or ceramic. But you think of some, originally based, I think, on quartz crystal, but there's a variety of sophisticated crystals and manufactured crystals now that are used for this purpose. But there are things that you can think about. I mean, electronic bathroom scales probably have ceramic, I'm guessing a bit here, but probably have ceramic piezoelectric devices. When you stand on it, it goes ouch and produces an electric signal in proportion to your weight. Smartphones are probably bristling with them. Everything you do with a smartphone, you pick it up, you twist it, you turn it. That's all controlled, or that's measured rather. That's all measured from piezoelectric devices, actually within the electronics of the device. Microphones, motors, electric clocks are regulated with quartz crystals, historically anyway. And they also work in reverse. So they're actually used to both measure and, for example, adjust the sensors and the optical components in the cameras and in the lenses. I'm not going to go any deeper there because it was a really interesting subject, but not something I know an enormous amount about, really just the principles themselves. So I think that's the end. I've just put a couple of, I'll send this round of the PDF, and I just put a couple of links, because I quite like photocopies, and a lot of the information I've got is from that website. And you can just, from what I can see, you can go onto the website, get all the information. If you want an app, you've got to pay £9 for it, but it's a one-off, and I thought, well worth the money. So that's it. That's a lot. Oh, I was a bit dry there. Sorry, I was stumbling over under my words.
You should have had a beer.
Sorry.
You should have had a beer.
I should have had, yeah. Well, I had a gin and tonic earlier on, and I thought
that should work. G&T should work just as well.
Well, I should have had another one, shouldn't I?
Yep, absolutely.
I thought, oh dear, sorry about that.
A bit more lubrication. Cool.
That's only water.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris.
Right. Okay, so it didn't really cover anything new, but it was just really some of my thoughts, and I've done a lot of playing around with the mirrorless, and I didn't get rid of the DSLR. But the more I use the mirrorless, the more I like it, actually. I suppose it's smaller than the DSLR, and I pick up the DSLR and it feels like an old friend, you know. But it's not really the size for just slipping in your pocket.
If you think about it, really, you know, the digital cameras are the way they are purely because it's just harping back to the old film cameras.
Yeah.
There's no reason why modern cameras need to look like that.
No.
Yeah?
No.
I mean, you basically want a lens with a bit of electronics on the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's going to be quite interesting to see how all of this develops.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think there's a lot to go, but you know, this and a lot of it takes. I mean, it's good. It's a OnePlus 6, which is very, very good. I don't think it's as good as the latest iPhone, but you know, on a decent day, it takes superb pictures, and a lot of the time, you don't need a camera. And I compare the pictures from my camera and the millions of pictures my daughter takes of her children. You know, and I look at what she takes and I think, well, I can't do any better with my £2,000 camera. I think the biggest disadvantage of these is they're just not right to hold to take pictures with. You know, you can turn them on their side. Sorry?
I tend to shake.
Yeah.
When I'm holding this, you know, it's.
Yeah, and the access to the controls is. I think
put the top on without meaning to.
One of the reasons why DSLRs are laid out the way they are. People buy the high-end ones so that all the buttons, it's all taken out of the menus, isn't it? So you've got
it's all taken out. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, making a camera smaller and smaller and smaller isn't necessarily a good thing. If you're in it, yes, it just depends what you want. I mean, Louise has got one of those iPhone 12 Pro, one of the latest ones, and the photos it takes are incredible. They're just
yeah.
So the she.
Yeah.
I get the iPhone 12 mini.
Yeah.
So, you know, it wasn't.
Really good. and they're coming along, aren't they? But they're fiddly to use if you want to do anything other than snap.
Yeah.
Even then, you're probably best buttons on the side rather than the screen.
Yeah.
There is a thing I saw somewhere about how you hold one of these damn things in order to take photographs, and it's something like that. So you're not covering it up, and you've got the button somewhere where you can press it, and it's quite complicated. Once you get it right, you can take them, and they're much steadier than if you just do what we all do and wave it around.
Yeah, so my
from my granddaughter.
If I can find it, I'll circulate it because it's quite a useful bit of information.
Yeah.
I've also
my volume buttons work very well like that.
Yeah,
but then I do that. I've got my finger over the lens. But when you get used to it, that is not too bad. I don't know if anybody saw Countryfile programme Sunday Before Last. I can't remember the photographer's name, but he's the photographer that works. But he's not.
Is that Simon King?
Simon King.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he's a naturalist, but he is a photographer by profession. He's a naturalist, and that was really interesting because he had Ellie with him, and he'd obviously lent her a camera with a big lens on it. And he was remarkable. He'd say, and he wouldn't be looking the other way, and he'd say, there's a buzzard up there. And she said, how did you see that? And he said, well, it's instinct, And he'd be around and he'd take a picture. And she was floundering around, obviously not a photographer. But then most of the programme was taken up with these two. But at the end, they started doing smartphone photography. And, he said, well, you lie down and you cannot get closer. You can be very inconspicuous and lie down, and the birds and the squirrels were coming around, and he was getting pictures of them from underneath. I mean, it was remarkable, really good pictures. And then he pulled out this telephoto lens, which you flip onto the front of you. And I'm sure they work well.
I've got one of those, but it's a cheap one.
Yeah. But I thought it was fascinating, actually, the quality of the pictures they got from the. But I wasn't inclined, particularly in this weather, to go lying
No,
back lawn taking pictures of things that the pigeons have probably come across. But anyway.
At the moment,
photos. Sorry,
I thought it was. Another program I'm watching at the minute. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Is called the Photo Arc.
No.
It's on. I think it's on one of the. Oh, it might be on Discovery.
Right.
It's this guy who works for National Geographic, so it might be National Geographic Channel. Thinking about it, but it's he's spent the last 10 years on and off taking photos of species of animals and insects and all sorts of creatures as a record of what they are. And some of them, there was an episode the other day, and he was taking pictures of these turtles, and there were only 3 of these things alive. And then he took a picture of a particular species of white rhino, and there were only 3 of those, and one of those died shortly afterwards. And it's quite amazing what he does. Yeah,
you can imagine all these animals running away from him. Give a photograph, will die.
Some of the lengths he goes to are quite amazing. Usually it's kind of a studio type shot, but some of the lengths he goes to get to some of these places, you couldn't normally do it. But if you see it, if you come across it, that's worth watching. I think that's quite.
Oh, look out for that.
Yeah.
Next month, it's interesting that you were saying, Ray, that we owe kind of quite a lot to the development of the SLR in the old film days, the way the cameras are now. Funnily enough, one of the things I've been doing in the last month is writing next month's presentation, and you'll never guess what it is. It's the kind of the development of the SLR from the first 35mm SLR to the first digital, and how that kind of impacts on
Hmm.
modern cameras. Like the bones of the modern camera are still there. It's all you can see as you go through. I thought it was when I started doing it, I thought this is going to be rubbish. I'm not entirely sure, but actually, I really enjoyed doing it. So the 24 cameras there, and 4 of them are what I've called watershed cameras, where everything changes at that moment. You might argue about which cameras I've chosen, actually.
I wonder.
So hopefully it'll be interesting. But we are starting to struggle with topics a little bit.
We are.
So if anybody's got any ideas, there's a lot of work goes in. You can see the kind of preparation that Chris has had to do. It takes time actually to sort out these presentations. They're often an hour or more long. And that's a lot of time to fill with useful, interesting information that's accurate.
I also find when I've done a presentation like that, after I've done it, I think, well, I was going to say that and I should have expanded on that. And you look at it and think, I could have done that an awful lot better. And if I then did it again, I probably could. Because when I was working, you know, I used to do presentations, we used to do seminars and things. So we perhaps do we do a tour of various companies and do a presentation to members of people. And the first one was always terrible. But by the time you got to the end of 6 or 7, you'd really got it really smooth and you said everything you wanted.
Well, that's it.
And then you just put it away and never do it again.
And you never got your notes out towards the end, did you? Just did it off the cuff.
That's right, yeah. And it's, doing this and only doing a one-off.
Yeah.
It's really the first one is a test. And I can think of about 10 things that I should have said in a different way. But if I did it again, which I'm not going to, it would be a lot smoother.
I don't remember if we were in the car going to Whitney once, Chris, and I said that I thought that the person who'd probably got the most out of doing presentations to the Wychwood group was me, personally, rather than...
Yes, I remember, yeah.
You learn so much. It does kind of teach you quite a lot.
Well, I've learned a lot, and you also you find out how much you don't know. But if you've got time to do it, you can really learn quite a lot. I've learned an awful lot since I've joined this group.
Mind you, that's why people do PhDs. There's an awful lot that you don't know all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. Has anyone got any pictures? I haven't got any this one.
No.
Well, I'm almost ashamed to show them. I've got one that's absolutely grim, but at least it shows that I was trying, and one that's slightly better, and a few others.
Have you got any of Jupiter and Saturn?
No, because I tell you why. It was actually a bad time to take pictures of them. Firstly, because I can't see them from home, because I look southeast, and they are not there. So I've got trees all around me except for this gap to the southeast. So everything has to be at the
top of that, it was cloudy, wasn't it?
Also, they're very, very low to the horizon, and they're only there fairly briefly at the end after sunset. So it'd be nice to take a wide-angle picture of it, but frankly, I was never there, so I didn't do it. Plus the fact my laptop battery is knackered, so I have to have it plugged into the mains all the time. And if you're powering an Astro camera, you need some power.
Tony, we came tonight to see these pictures. We knew you'd have come up with the best pictures of what you said.
Well,
let us down.
I assure you, you're going to see a little constellation that's been absolutely ruined by my picture. But I'm going to show it to you anyway. Shall I have a go?
Can't wait. Let's see it.
Yeah.
All right. Right. Can you see that?
No. Yes.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Well,
No.
you can't see anything.
Nothing.
So all I can see is Tony has started screen sharing. So
That's what I've got.
So I'll stop the
obviously
share.
done it.
I'll stop it, start
Oh.
it again.
Are you sharing the right window?
The
Probably
share,
not. I'll try
share
that one.
screen, and then share. Share screen, share. There we go.
Is that it?
And well,
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
something.
Okay. You can see there's not too many, so it won't take long. Let's get going. I thought I'd just put this in.
No,
It's not a picture.
We're not seeing that either.
I didn't take this last week, but I thought I'd put it in there because summer will come eventually. This is no.
We can't.
You're still not sharing properly, Tony.
All right.
you can
I'll
only
stop
see
it.
the icon.
If you stop sharing, Tony, I'll talk you through it.
Yeah.
So you
So-
press the green button down the bottom, share screen.
Yep.
Then there's a few options, and you got a Windows PC, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's screen,
Screen. There should be one that says screen.
That's what I did first time. Okay. So I go screen. I'll press that.
and then down to share,
Yeah.
and all right. Now it should work.
Hey,
There you
Yes,
go.
there we are.
Hey.
You're all right. It's all right now, is it?
Yes.
Very good.
All right.
The pictures
This-
are very
It's not
bright.
a. It's a picture from a long time ago. I took this about 2015, but it's well, Cape Town's just round the corner there. This is Camps Bay, and these are called the Seven Sisters. It's the back of Table Mountain, but the sun was shining, and I thought I ought to put a picture in with a bit of sunshine because all my pictures are the one that are taken at night. Right now, this is a ruined picture.
that's
This
all
is
right.
Looks good
well,
to
you
me.
think that, but it's not actually.
This is the
These-
Seven Sisters as well.
It's the Seven Sisters, but it's all overexposed, and I didn't quite get the focus right. It
Yeah.
was a bit disappointing. You can see the nebulosity. Apparently, these very bright stars are travelling through a cloud of gas at the moment. But I'll have another go at that one. So that was the first go out with my deep sky astro camera, and I just struggled with the settings. That's a picture I took a year ago of the Orion Nebula with my previous setup. So that's the Orion Nebula. Those are the 4 stars in the centre called the trapezium. And I had another go at it the other night.
Oh,
That's
wow.
better.
And that's
Whoa.
what a proper astronomical camera can do for you. So that's it. And it does bring out an awful lot of detail. But even so, it's slightly over. To get that sort of there, you have to overexpose in the centre. What I should have done is taken 2 sets of shots, one underexposed to show the centre of the cluster,
Yeah.
and one then to capture that and actually blended the two together. But you live and learn, don't you? But I was quite pleased with that. So at least I can make it work now. I
Yeah.
can focus it, and I can
Good.
pretty much get the exposure right. And then the other evening I was out. In fact, it was last night, and it was just, I was looking at the sky. It was cloudy. It was almost dark. And I just thought, I quite like these sort of winter skies through the trees. And I just had a few goes.
Yeah.
And I just, I'm doing it all manually because clearly wouldn't focus on anything. But I don't know, it just had a nice feeling about winter to me.
Really nice then.
And that, believe it or not, I moan like 10 when I'm out with my camera because my telescope. So I've got a street light across the road, and they repaired it a couple of months ago, and it's a bane of my life. But it's shining through the greenhouse, and I just quite like the shape.
Oh, yeah.
Actually. It's a little bit abstract.
You need an air gun.
I was just going to say, took the words out of my mouth.
Right, that's it. I'm done. There you go. See, none of you are looking excited. I didn't think you would be.
Very good. Good. At least you got some.
Well, you can go out in almost darkness and take them. I mean, I do actually. I
Yeah.
spend all my time
Yeah.
sitting there in the dark hours trying to get the wrong picture. But I do enjoy it. I really enjoy it. Actually, in terms of talks, Dean, I mean, if you gave me a couple of months, I probably could do a session on astrophotography if people would be interested.
Oh,
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I mean, you know,
I think a sort of getting started with astrophotography would be a good one.
well, that's it. In fact, you don't need, actually, you've already all got the kit you need.
Yeah.
You know, so you're right, you can branch off and do specialist things as you can do in any other branch of photography, and you need more gear. But actually, you can do an awful lot of stuff with what you've got. And there's a real move at the moment in the sort of astrophotography circles for people to actually, you might say, use the minimum kit, stuff that they can easily carry around, take anywhere, and take pictures and do, and they produce some stunning results, absolutely stunning. So I don't, but I can sort of give you an idea from what they say about how they do it.
I think it'd be
That would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll have a go. You know, I can't, if you give me a, I say, I mean, obviously, if you're set up for next month, Dean, perhaps if I did it the month after.
Yeah, that
If
sounds
that was all right. You know, I'll probably bore the pants off you, but I'll do my best.
You get my vote. Definitely get my vote.
No,
Okay.
no, that would be interesting because.
Well, I just feel we ought to take the strain off you guys a bit because you've done very well over many, many months. And I've enjoyed it. So it's my turn to put something back into the pot now.
Good man. Good man.
Does anybody else have any shots to show before I show mine?
I've got a few, but they're not very good. But it's just what have we been doing in the last, month or two. Let me try.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hang on, why have I got into that? I had it right before. Hang on. Oh, there you go. There you go. Right. This was one morning, a couple of weeks ago, less than that really, just looking out of my office window really, and I just looked at it and I thought it's really nice.
It is. Yeah.
And it was a frosty morning, obviously, and sort of misty and typical winter. I was going to do it in black and white, and then I left it with the sort of the green of the mistletoe, which is my next neighbour. And I just thought I preferred it like that. I don't know what other people think, whether it should have been taken to black and white, but I quite like that.
I like that, actually.
I like it.
Well, it does actually stand out, which if it was totally monochrome, you wouldn't, I don't think you'd see them so much.
I think it's good, actually.
I don't think there's enough contrast in that to do it black and white.
There isn't.
No.
I think the green is needed here.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to look hard enough to see it's green, but it's just not quite black, is it? It's that's what I thought. Anyway.
No, it's good.
But that was, I was just looking at really the sort of what have we been doing the last month, looking out the bloody window. Right, I need to move it on, which could be interesting. Let's move to that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just happened. Sorry, it's a rotten photograph because you don't like my shed in the background and all that. But I just saw that. I thought it looked really, really nice, actually.
It's very sort of what can I say? It's almost like abstract, isn't it? The way the thing is sort of broken in places, or you see bits of it.
Yeah.
I think I would be tempted to crop it down and get rid of all that stuff on the left.
Well, I did actually, Ray. I mean, it was bigger than that to start with. I mean, you can see the chair on the right-hand corner and the stuff on the left, but I just felt if you cropped it down too much, you'd lose the... I've taken some of the side off anyway, and I thought probably leave that much, but you may be right. You may well be right.
Well, it's just to make it more of an abstract, not worry too much about what you're actually saying,
Yeah, good point. I'll have a try and just do that sort of bit, you mean? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's worth experimenting with it.
Yeah, it was just, right. Just before Christmas, you went to a walk in Cowton Court, or however they pronounce it. And I just loved that. They put these little posts here. I thought it just appealed to my sense of ridiculous, really, that you've got this thing there. You have to stand and look through the box to take it. But it wasn't a bad picture, and I decided to leave that bit in it and take it there because it was just sort of something silly to do, really. But that was what it is. What I've been doing since, of course, is walking, because Jenny and I, my wife, like walking. And That's her about 10 days ago, looking at a nice path. There's a river somewhere, sort of runs about there, I think.
Yeah.
And to get there, sorry, I've got a new mouse on this thing, it doesn't work. Yeah, to get there, you have to sort of go down this, and you can see how much water there was lying about.
Yeah.
And that was looking t'other way. There's a lot of water being around, of course.
You're right.
And I did find that, which it's actually, I don't, it's difficult to explain, but if you see up there, there's a little bit of a wall. And actually what's happening is the water is flowing across and down a little gully. And it's not quite abstract, but I just liked it. I just saw it and thought, that's, you know, it's quite a nice little sort of whatever. Whatever. And I did an abstract.
Oh, that's nice, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a puddle, and I just thought, I just like that picture somewhere on there. And then the other one which I do like is, that was in the garden.
Lovely.
I just saw that and I looked out the window and I thought, that is, you know, that I liked. And I took 3 or 4 of those, and that's probably the best one, but it looked, you know, it looked quite nice, really, in the snow that morning. And what else did we do? We sat there with the fire pit, warming us. Actually, I don't know if you remember, there was this thing about carols, you know, around the country, and it was done by the local radio station. And we sat with our next door neighbour leaning over the wall because we were social distancing, mulled wine, fire pit in front of the drive, and everyone driving past thought we were completely bloody loony. But there you go, we enjoyed it. And we finished with that at the end, which sort of...
That's nice.
It,
I like that.
it just sort of, yeah, it's that was what was left. And then I decided to play with my Christmas tree, which is different, but there you go. But anyway, that's what I've been doing for the last...
That one looks like a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, it's good though.
Yeah, it's
a kaleidoscope.
it's actually the Christmas tree. You can sort of just get the shape of it, which I'm trying to avoid, but it's... I was just playing really one day, and I thought I've got no best to do but play with a few things on the camera, and I came up with that, and I thought that's all right.
Yeah, it's good.
That's what I've been doing for a little while, and I will return it to you. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I'll try.
Up the top of the screen. There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
You found it.
There you go. We've done it. We're back.
Cool. You move for any more?
I got some I took at Autumn on the Water just before Christmas. Remember when we did the treasure hunt there, the Christmas tree was in the river.
Yeah.
A share, isn't it? Well done, Dean.
Same as I did, Philip.
No, just get rid of that window.
Yeah. Got rid of everything.
Presumably you've got a folder somewhere. Button, 7 button, edit.
It's right at the top. Somebody said that Apple deliberately goes slow after a few years.
I think it didn't go and stop after a few years. Actually, mine does.
Yeah. So we, just a week before Christmas, we just went down there, and it was when remember when we had the foggy evenings.
Yeah.
It was, and I stood on one bridge, and I thought it'd be nice if somebody came and stood on the other bridge. So I waited about 5 minutes, and those people obliged for me.
It's nice. I like that one.
And then,
Oh, I like the ducks, yeah.
I love the ducks. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah, right.
and I was trying to get the street lights, but it's a little bit noisy.
Yeah,
The
street lights are really difficult.
I did try putting it in black and white, but the noise was too great.
They're always just blown out totally.
Just playing around with various ones. And then we met up with my granddaughter, actually does gymnastics in Bolton. So she just popped down to see us before they went to the gym. And that car started. I was still on the bridge, and I thought, yes, just to get the exhaust fumes on me.
Nice though, that.
Yeah.
Nice, atmospheric.
There's your ducks.
They're very effective, aren't they? Very.
Yeah. Into black and white.
Yeah, very nice.
And that's looking across at the pub. And one of the shops. That is it.
Ah,
Nice.
Very good.
Oh, damn, those good set of pictures there.
That's good.
cool. Right. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Off you go, Dean. Come on.
Let's have a look. I haven't got that many. Oh, hello. Go away. There we go. I can see it now. Okay. So in October, I went down to Cornwall and I went around for a few days with my dad and we took some pictures. And some of them, there was one set which was tin mines. And they were taken in colour, and the colour shots are rubbish. I mean, well, I might show you actually if you can find them, but they're really pants. So the Whitney Group had a speaker called Adrian Beasley.
Okay.
So long ago. So I did
his influence here, most definitely. Yeah.
What a difference it makes. So that is one. There's another, and you can they just lend so much more atmosphere to them. At the end, I'll perhaps, if I can find them, I think I might have them in a file where you've got both shots together, the colour and the white. Maybe I'll have a look at that. This is the house walks. This is the flood defence pond just off the high street, a couple of fields in. And there's one the other side as well, but I have got pictures of it. This is the day it snowed. Camera. This is part of my project for Ruin Farms. I took one to church. In fact, I stood literally more or less on James's drive to take that. Yeah, that's where that was done. And then just after the snow, there was a frost, wasn't there? And so we had a kind of the remnants of the snow and a bit of frost.
That's nice, Dean. Actually, that looked really worked well, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is ambient light. There is a better one. Yeah, that one I think I like the best. The light's coming because as the sun rose, it just got above the trees, and there was this kind of shaft of sunlight, and some of these seed heads or whatever they are were in it. So I quickly hurried over and kind of started taking pictures of them. You can see kind of the result. What else we got? Whereas this is with wing flash. I had a new one for my birthday, and that's what that does. So you can see how black the background is and how detailed all of this is. It's very different in character. So, you know, I didn't use it on the other two because it would have just washed all of that natural light out, whereas there was nothing really. I did. Hibernate. Yeah. And there was somebody had a rose sticking over the hedge that still had buds on it.
Yeah.
And that was yesterday morning. I was absolutely desperate for something to take yesterday. But if I'll go back and yeah, I might have. If you're interested, I'll whip through these, and you stop me if you want to talk about one of these. So I started off there's the original shot. That's the black and white. Some of them, there's not a massive difference, but that's the original.
It's still much more dramatic, isn't it, in black and white?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's black. So you can see how rubbish the black and white shot is.
Yeah.
The black and white one is very different. That one. This is one of the ones I showed you. So here's the black and white version after Adrian Beasley did, and that is colour.
Nothing. Nothing compared to black and white, is it?
Yeah.
It's so different. There you go. So, because I really like this shot, and that is the colour version.
Yeah.
It's just so different. This has got the whites taken up, and it picked out all of the mortar in the stonework. And you take the dehaze slider, and basically you get a bit kind of gung ho with it, and slide it all the way over, and then slowly bring it back, and you end up with this kind of dramatic effect. It can introduce noise into the sky, I've discovered, but I don't mind that so much, actually. It gives it a kind of filmy effect. You can see, I think Ray did a bit of a presentation on based on what Adrian Beasley said to the working group. So, oh, hello, gone the wrong way. So, but there's the colour one. That's black and white. It's just very, very different. There's black and white. There's the colour. Got that. And there's one. This one. What I've done here is introduce light where there wasn't any. So there's a radial filter over this part of the shot here, and just increase the exposure basically. And you can see where it comes from that shot. That's the original. That's the end result. I wouldn't claim to be brilliant at this technique. I think there's quite a lot more to learn, but I'm prepared to put in the effort because it can be really worth it. I mean, this looks like you've captured some kind of amazing light, and actually what the shot looked like was that. And that's another radial filter, but a really long, thin one, right away across, so it kind of goes like this. I think it needs a bit more playing with. So there you go. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Not that many. There's only so many local photos you can. Especially when it's so waterlogged. There's places I can't get to because you lose your wellies trying to get there.
I had a very good photograph which I didn't take, which was my wife her wellie stuck in the mud and me having to pull her out. Unfortunately, I had two choices. Do I pull her out or take the photograph? Sorry, guys, I missed it.
Stay there for a bit while I go and get my camera.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I saw yesterday. He's still keen to do the thingy exhibition. Mentioned it again. Obviously, it'll depend on restrictions, won't it? And things. I don't think we're going to be doing it. If we do it this year, it'll be later on, probably.
Yeah.
It's got to be difficult, isn't it?
Sort of autumn is probably the right time to do it anyway. Spring or autumn, and we ain't going to do it in the spring. So.
Yeah, but he specifically mentioned in the Wychwood photo group is he wants to do things with.
Yeah.
Which to me, hopefully, that'll give us access to the land. Things like the Broome Woods when the bluebells are out. It'd be nice to go in there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Have permission to go in.
As long as we don't stand on the bluebells.
Be careful.
If you're listening to Victoria Hillman, did you read? You
No.
Kidlington?
No, I didn't watch that one.
Kidlington had a talk on Monday, and it was Victoria Hillman, and she was saying, you know, that there are an awful lot of these places, you know, where, you know, originally there was a little narrow path through the middle of these, you know, but because there's so many people going to see them, you know, people are not just sticking to those paths. The paths are getting bigger, you know, and people are wandering into it, and they're destroying the, you know, the bluebells and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about Broome Wood. I don't know if you've ever been in there to take bluebell pictures, but it's beautiful. It's just a carpet, bluebell.
Yeah.
There are no, you know, there's not loads of people going in there because you can't drive it. And I think it'd be, you know, worth us doing if we're allowed. That is, of course.
Yeah.
It seems keen enough. So
Well, by May, you'd hope we might be seeing some light at the end of some sort of tunnel.
It depends how effective this vaccine is.
Yeah. I'm banking on it being really, really effective, Ray. I mean, you know, I don't know about
You're
you.
not the only one. I think everybody in
about
the
you.
country is banking on it.
No, I don't know about you guys, but you know, my wife is a couple of years younger than me, and it's going to be very, very hard for me not to party while she's waiting for her vaccination. But I'll try and be patient, but I can't promise anything.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, we're all. I think a lot of us are the same, actually.
Yeah.
See you out there then.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, okay.
All you guys sitting round that fire pit then?
But not too close, you understand.
Well, you
Like
know,
aged hippies?
I don't know if anyone walked. But you didn't walk past that night with your dog, did you, Ray? As we were out in the front with the fire pit and having our mulled wine.
Not at night, no. No, it's bad enough getting voices across that graveyard during the day. Don't want it during the night, thank you very much.
Oh, we were out. We did have out the front on the road. Actually,
That was the other side, was it?
yeah, we're out the front. Yeah, but yeah, the graveyard's all right. It's, you know, a lot of friendly people in there.
Yeah. It's just when you're walking past and you hear Ray.
I've only done that once.
His music, Harry.
I thought you were talking to me last week, right? Who walked that meeting, you and the dog?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's never, I have to say, you know, but graveyards have never bothered me at all.
Well, they don't bother us, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't be
Of
here.
course not. Yeah.
Jeeves, so doing well. I can't stand them, especially at night. I don't like being in there at night anywhere.
I regularly used to, I remember when I was younger, there was a particular pub I used to use, and the bus that I used to get after I came out of the pub was the other side of the graveyard. You either took a long walk all the way around, yeah, or you went straight through the middle. And there was no lights.
Hmm.
No
But
more.
of course, I'd had plenty of beer, so it didn't matter anyway.
Be nice to get out again.
But thank you, Chris.
Are we done?
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
I'm sure-
I'm good.
Thank
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the effort. As I may be full of regrets in 2 months' time.
No. We're looking forward to it.
Linda, how's Brian?
I think
Yeah,
what we'll have to
he's
do
missing.
is make it open
Yeah.
to the Whitney group as well.
He's
Like
really missing his swimming.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so's Nora. Well,
yeah.
I'll mention
Yeah,
it to her.
they're swimming buddies. Nora and Brian are swimming buddies, but they can't go at the minute. So there we are.
Yeah.
I think it's just a case of gritting your teeth and grinding through this, isn't it, really, at the moment?
Yeah,
Yep.
Well, that's all we can
And
do.
keep yourself safe. I mean, it's what you've got to do.
Yeah.
Watch that cat, Dean.
This is a kitten.
You don't. Yeah, I know. We've got one of those.
She's nice. Daddy's girl, this one.
We've got a kitten that's about the size of a. Well, it looks like he's heading to be a size of a small donkey. Still thinks it's a kitten.
Yeah.
Got the heaviest footfall of any cat I've come across.
You better watch. People will think they've seen the Beast of Burford.
Yeah.
No, I mean, to be fair, you know, I probably wouldn't be too alarmed if I saw it, but it is pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, somebody apparently claims to have seen this down at Ducklington Lake the other day.
Yeah.
It was a sighting of the Beast of Burford.
Beast of Burford.
Yeah.
It's got a ring about it, hasn't it?
It has, isn't it?
You know,
Yeah.
you know.
Like the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I lived in Burford all my childhood and I never saw the beast. I saw quite a few beasts, but not the Beast of Burford.
Not the beast.
Not the beast.
I mean,
You probably didn't.
You never took that shortcut across Burford Wreck after school. There was a shortcut across the wreck, and then it went through a little alleyway. You had to be quite brave to go down there.
Okay.
I suppose that was just because people were beastly, wasn't it, rather than beasts?
Oh.
It was those boarders, Tony, the boys that boarded. They used to hang around down there,
Oh, yeah.
waiting for us young girls.
Yeah. I was always a day boy. I never got into that scene.
I must admit, I did used to dawdle through there just in case. Oh dear.
Right, on that note.
Yes.
Sorry to bring the tone down.
It was great to see you all anyway, even if it's on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for bearing with me.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
When's
you.
our next
Bye.
meeting?
I'm gonna.
Thank you.
Go.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.